back for more, huh? Okay. Well, I think tonight's video about my thoughts on GMRS here in the United States. A few talking points that possibly other YouTubers, forum topics haven't covered. Let's go that route. How's that sound? Topic today. GMRS, which is the General Mobile Radio Service. And what is it? It's a licensed land-based short-range communications, which is FCC licensed for anyone that is a citizen in the United States that has a Social Security card, basically. Let's see, it's mainly voice, but you can transmit just a bit of data for such as text, such as GPS locations. That is dependent upon, of course, the radio itself, if it can do that function. It is a channelized radio service. There are 22 channels for simplex, which is radio to radio. There are 8 channelized frequencies, channels, for repeater operations in the GMRS band. There are no variable frequencies to tune in and out of like you can on amateur radio. These are specific. These are all you get. Some GMRS radios will not produce or not give the 8 repeater channels. Some will only give you the 22 simplex. Be aware of what you're buying before you buy it. As far as GMRS radios. As far as the types of radios, of course you have your handhelds, which would be considered HTs. There are mobile radios, and then you also have repeaters that you can purchase and use in the GMRS field. So let's talk about a little bit about the history. The origin is first known as a Class A citizens radio service. And that was, believe it or not, back in the 1940s. However, it wasn't the channelized plan that we have today. And the wattage output was a bit different. It was channelized. There were, what was it, 38 channels or something like that? I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. It's nothing like it is today. but it was a wideband FM 50 kilohertz space channel setup. In the 1970s, this is when they started calling it the GMRS. In the 1980s was when they overhauled the whole GMRS band plan and the operations thereof into what you're now accustomed to with the GMRS band plan radios, outputs, and such. Let's see. I think in the 1940s it was a 60 watt output limit. Now, from here on in, there's now a 50 watt limit, and there's different frequencies as well. We'll get into that in a minute. That's just a quick overhaul and overview on that. Got a lot to cover. I'm going to do it as fast as I can here. Okay, now let's talk about uses. First off, it is definitely an alternative to Citizens Band Radio, CB radio. However, it offers more portability, being that the handhelds, the GMRS radios, are much smaller, lighter. The antennas are shorter. They don't need to be as long, such as for a CB handheld, which is quite long unless it's a dense coiled dummy, rubber dummy antenna, which they hardly work anyway. They're more of a dummy load. But anyway, so portability. And of course, uses. Off-roading is a big market for GMRS radios, radio manufacturers. Camping, family outings, I can go on. Neighborhood emergency preparedness, farming, conventions, traveling on freeways between different cars, having that communication between the different cars rather than having to use the cell phone. Because in certain parts of the United States, believe it or not, there's still no cell coverage in certain areas. Whereas if you're using a GMRS radio, the other folks that you're communicating with could be half a mile down the road on the freeway, and you can talk back and forth with no issues. Clean, clear signal and audio. What are the benefits? Well, a big one is that the majority of the frequencies between GMRS and the FRS radio service are the same. Family radio service. So GMRS radios can talk to FRS radio users, back and forth, FRS to GMRS. The only difference is that the GMRS radios are higher output, and they have those 8 extra frequencies or channels for the repeater operations. So, if you have some kids that are interested in the GMRS radios that you're using, you might want to start them off on an FRS radio first, being that it's a lower power output So if they just screw around on the radio, it doesn't produce as much radio noise, QRM, to other GMRS or FRS radio operators, because they're just a blister pack, small radio, small output. Once they learn how to use the radio further on, or in the event of an emergency, you can hand them a GMRS radio and they know how to operate it. GMRS radios are very easy to operate in comparison to an amateur radio in the same or similar frequency area. We'll get into that in a minute. Anyway, yeah, so you can get people comfortable with and how to operate a radio, a handheld radio or a mobile, by getting them on the FRS first. There are no FRS, well, there might be an FRS mobile, I don't know, I've never even bothered looking to see if there's a mobile version. But I know there are handheld versions of Family Radio Service, and they're very inexpensive radios. Anyway, yeah, benefits. Excellent signal output, they're high power, GMS radios are high power. It's transmitting on FM, so it's a clean audio, easy to understand. Good sound quality. And another big benefit is that you have the repeater operations, which will make the GMRS handhelds as well as the mobiles produce a larger signal, a further signal. You'll transmit much further. See, if there's a repeater up on the hill, here you are in your car. I'm not drawing a car very well. But anyway, see, you're in a car. Your antenna's here, signal up to the repeater. Repeater retransmits as you're transmitting down around a large scale area, whereas just the mobile is only going to transmit a smaller area, or person with a small HT radio. However, that HT radio can transmit up to the repeater, and the repeater is retransmitting that same signal on the other side of the mountain, talking to this guy in the mobile. So there's a big advantage to mobile operations and HT operations when a repeater is involved. FRS radios do not have that option. FRS radios are not designed or allowed to transmit on those repeater frequencies that GMRS has. Another benefit, no test. There's no testing involved to get your GMRS license here in the United States. You just pay a fee with the Federal Communications Commission right on their website, and away you go. And this, once you get your GMRS license from the FCC, this includes the whole family, the whole immediate family, using the call sign that the FCC will distribute to you to operate on this GMRS band plan. Okay, let's go on to the next thing here. Okay, say you're an experienced radio operator already. You have your ham radio license and maybe other licenses. Why would you even bother with getting a GMRS license? Well, for one thing, The whole family gets to utilize that one license that you applied for. The whole immediate family, the whole household. So you could have multiple radios, they all use the same call sign. They have the ability to get their own call sign if they wish. However, they can all operate off that one call sign. Of course, ease of use. You will find that GMRS radios are very easy to operate. The only critical portion of the GMRS radios would be possibly entering memory channels for the different repeaters. But being that there are only 8 repeater channels, if there are multiple repeaters in your area, there may be some repeaters that are on the same frequency. The only difference will be that they're using a different tone, subaudible tone, to enter for you to transmit into that repeater. Either a continuous tone coded squelch system or a DCS code. We'll get into that in a minute too. But it's really not that difficult. Of course, repeaters for, up to triple distance. And once again, for those people that are fearing technical tests, the FCC does not require any testing involved to get your GMRS license. It's very simple. It's just paying a fee. And you have to go to the FCC website and register with them to get a FRN number. I'll talk about that in just a second. But that's free as well. So, next issue. Okay, let's just talk about it now. How do you get your GMRS license? Very easy. You just go to the website, the FCC website, and the first thing you will need to do, if you do not have other radio licenses, such as ham or GROL and whatnot, you will have to go to the FCC website and get an FRN number. That's an FCC registration number is what it is. FCC registration number. It's basically the same thing the U.S. government uses with your Social Security number. It sticks with you forever. It's what the government uses to, single you out for whatever you put into the system. Well, for FCC, the FCC registration number, anytime they're dealing with you directly, they're going to want that FRN number. If you get multiple licenses through them, it's all going to come down to the same FRN number. Instead of them calling you by your name, you'll basically just have an FRN number. And to acquire this FRN number, it's through the FCC website, and it is completely free. You just have to go through the little ins and outs on their website to get it. And I think it takes a day or two for them to apply it and for them to notify you or that you have an FRN number. Once you have the FRN number, you can go back into the FCC website for a second time and then apply for your GMRS license. And one of the requirements is an FRN number. And you'll be able to give them that number because you just acquired it. And they'll want other little tidbits of information, not a lot. they don't really pry too heavily into your past just for a GMRS license. Once you once you have given them all the information, it comes down to a fee which you can pay either by credit card or debit. Debt. That's funny. $35 US. That's all it is. That's for 10. That equals out to 10 years of operating a GMRS license. And when they give you the license, you will be given a call sign, which you will use on your GMRS radio while you're using it, while you're talking on it. And what else can I give you on the how to get a GMRS license? That's about it, really. It's very similar to amateur radio as well. Amateur radio gets a license for 10 years as well. Amateur radio, FCC gives us a call sign. You'll find a lot of similarities between GMRS and ham radio. But there are some talking points that should be introduced into GMRS that aren't, which I'll go over a little later. Especially because there are no tests, and there are some things that should be at least talked about or written down on paper to show the people that buy GMRS radios, hey, look out for this, do not do that, kind of thing. We'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, let's talk about, how about operation tips? Now, if you're already a radio operator, ham radio, CB radio, whatever, if it's a radio that transmits, a lot of this information is pretty much, yeah, I already know, that kind of thing. But for those that don't, I'm just going to go over it. Operation tips. Because GMRS is in the 462 to 467 megahertz range, that's UHF, ultra high frequency. The higher the frequency that you go, the more capability of having RF radio frequency loss you will have through any kind of coaxial cable when you're transmitting and receiving, mainly transmitting. When you're in the HF band, you really don't have to worry about it. But this high in frequency, you have to worry about it. If you have any cable lengths longer than, say, 20 feet, you must start to worry about RF loss through your coaxial cable. So keep that in mind. So RF loss and coax. You want to get premium coax, low loss, low RF loss. Especially if you're building a base station, or you use a mobile GMRS radio with a base station antenna up on the roof or on a tower, and you have to run long lengths of coax from point A to point B, the radio to the antenna. You need to have some really good coax, low loss, because a lot of that signal, once you're transmitting, is going to be radiating out of the coax before it makes its way to the antenna, because it's in the UHF range. Self-policing. Just like amateur radio. It's supposed to be anyway. People self-police the bands. They act in a semi-professional manner when communicating with other people over the air and not doing stupid things on the air. Same applies for general mobile radio service. And from what I'm hearing in the northwest of the United States here, they do a very good job. Equal to, or maybe even better than amateur radio sometimes, from what I'm hearing. What I'm actually hearing on the air. Okay. Because this is a ultra high frequency radio system, higher gain antennas are definitely something to look forward to. If you're getting some loss in the coax, even if it's a mobile setup with RG58 coax real thin, and the coaxial length is maybe 16 to 20 feet, it's still a heavy loss of transmitted signal. Not as much as it would be if it was a 50-foot section or 100-foot section, but you're still losing some RF. However, if you put a high gain antenna, a good quality high gain antenna, specific for these frequencies, specific for GMRS, you kind of get some of that RF loss back when you're, I mean, you don't, but because you get an antenna with gain, it's amplifying the signal somewhat, which helps in the effect of losing RF loss through that coax before it reaches the antenna. So keep that in mind. And of course, no obstructions. This applies to any radio system where you're transmitting. You don't want to have an antenna, whether it's a mobile antenna or a base antenna, up next to another obstacle. So if it's metal, brick, doesn't matter. You want the antenna to be free and clear all the way around as much as possible. That's just a given. But those that are just starting in radio, you need to know that. Okay, that's enough for that. We'll get into more stuff. Well, if GMRS is 462, 467 megahertz UHF, they're not the most expensive radios, but why not just get an FRS radio instead on the same frequencies, minus the repeater channels? Well, you don't want to do that unless you're just talking to some friends within half a block, maybe a block's distance in a city setting. FRS radios are very low power output. I'll get into the power outputs between GMRS and FRS here in a minute. But you've got low power, which means shorter distance that you can transmit and receive or be able to hear people on. And of course, no repeater access. So you're limited to whatever you can hear on those little blister pack radios with the tiny antennas. Also, FRS radios have a antenna that is built onto the radio and cannot be taken off the radio. Where GMRS radios, a majority of them, I'm speaking HTs, handhelds right now, handheld GMRS radios, you can unscrew the antenna and put a longer, higher gain antenna on it for even more distance. You cannot do that legally with an FRS radio. Sure, if you're technical and you want to do something against the law, you can put a you can put a higher gain FRS antenna on a FRS handheld radio. You're not supposed to. It is a big no-no. Okay, let's talk distances. Let's talk how to spell correctly. Okay, distances, there are so many variables, and that goes for any radio service at all. Whether it's CB, whether it's police, fire, medical, whether it's anything, there's always a lot of variables whether the signal actually reaches point A to point B or not. So keep that in mind. There's terrain, there's obstacles, there's weather. Weather can be a big part of it too, believe it or not. Elevation is a huge part of radio communications, especially at ultra high frequencies. Ultra high frequencies is basically line of sight, where HF, which is very low in the band, it can actually skip and get greater distances. But with all that in mind, let's just say right now for the HTs, the handy talkies, the handheld GMRS radios, normal distances, you might get up to 5 miles. Up to 5 miles. There are some instances with elevation and no obstacles, you might get 10 miles. From mountaintop to mountaintop, no obstacles. Say you're on top of a mountain, you're talking to another climber on another mountain 40 miles away. Yeah, you might get 40 miles. But that is such an extreme, and because of the elevation and no obstacles. But how often is that going to happen? Mobile radios, mobile GMRS radios. Let's say you're good for maybe 10 miles, and that's with a good antenna, properly installed, no obstructions on the rig itself, bothering the signal once you're transmitting. You could get, with perfect conditions, you could get 30 miles. Now with a repeater, using either a handheld or a mobile, you can add on another 30 miles to that, all the way up to 100 plus miles. A huge swath of land, depending on how high that repeater is set up on, what's the elevation of that repeater set. What kind of gain does that antenna have on that repeater setup? How well is it hearing up there? So keep that in mind. Also, for FRS, if you're using an FRS radio, what's your distance for an FRS radio? Well, I've learned when I've used FRS radios between the family members, when we would go on a beach outing, you might get a full block, a full city block. And that's only if both parties on both radios were outside. As soon as somebody were to walk into a store, the signal's diminished. You might get a half a block at that point. What's the distance then? Well, one block would be less than a quarter of a mile, and then you might get an eighth of a mile. Extremes on an FRS, it's possible you could get 10 miles, say up on a ridge, talking to another person on a mountain or something. Yeah, FRS radios just don't have the power to compete with a GMRS radio. GMRS handheld radios, 5 watts output versus FRS at 2 watts. Plus the antennas on a FRS radio, very small, minute. less output. GMRS radios, the handhelds, have a taller antenna, more tuned to that frequency, and they can be removed, and you can actually add a higher performance, higher gain antenna to them. Hence, more output, longer distance. So let's talk about the channel plan real quick. Give me a moment and I will write up the channel plan. You don't have to sit here and watch me do it. 1 second. Okay, here is the channelized band plan for both GMRS and FRS. These frequencies are shared by both FRS, GMRS. Channels 1 through 22. There are no variables. These are the exact frequencies only. These are both shared by both FRS and GMRS. So in the event that you are handing out FRS radios to your kids, those kids' radios, they all have channel, up to channel 22. So does the GMRS radio. However, GMRS radios also have, if it's included, these frequencies, which would be considered channel 23 up to 30. But if you look, you'll see redundancy here. 462.550, 462.550, 575. This whole section from 15 to 22 is the exact same from 23 to 30. The difference between the two is that these are the repeater channels. These are simplex. Repeater channels are listening on the same frequencies from 15 to 22, but when you transmit, these are the transmit frequencies for each channel. You listen on 462.550 for channel 23, but you're transmitting at 467.550. That's why there's a plus sign at the end of the frequencies to indicate there is a repeater. So yes, these frequencies here cannot be added to an FRS radio. They are not included. FRS radios only go to channel 22. Some of the older plastic packed radios for FRS, some of them only went to channel 14. I've got a couple of old Cobra handheld FRS radios that only go to 14, and they only put out probably a quarter of a watt rather than a half a watt or 2 watts. As far as the frequency the outputs of these GMRS versus FRS, from channels 1 through 8, GMRS radios can put out 5 watts peak. You can put out less on some radios. 1 through 7. Yeah, 1 through 7. 1 through 7 is 5 watts. However, for FRS, depending on the radio, how they're built, if they can provide that or not, peak output is legally limited to 2 watts output for your transmission output. From channels 8 through 14, both GMRS and FRS are limited to half a watt. Half a watt only. You'll also notice that from 8 to 14, the frequencies have changed. We were from 1 to 7 at 462 point whatever frequency megahertz, and then it jumps up to 467 point whatever megahertz. Going on to channel 15 and to 22, we jump back down to 462 megahertz again. And here, for GMRS, the outputs go up to 50 watts, legal limit. Which is a very big plus sign for those that are using a mobile radio. And FRS, you're still only limited to 2 watts. The radios are only designed to go up to 2 watts. GMRS radios, you have the option, depending on what radio you have, what it's capable of, you can go up to 50 watts legal limit. As far as the repeaters, repeater frequencies, again, cannot be done by FRS radios. But you'll notice there are only 8 repeater frequencies. And so that being, let's say, for instance, in my area here in the northwest part of the United States, there are a few repeaters on GMRS that are the same exact frequency. However, due to the continuous tone coded squelch system being a different number, different tone, it will only access whichever repeater you want it to activate depending on that tone, even though there are 2 repeaters within the same area that you can access. That keeps it so that one repeater doesn't keep keying up with the other repeater because of the different tones. So even though there are only 8 frequencies for this, there are many tones that you can use, which means many repeaters can be on the same frequency. And this is the case in this neck of the woods. And there's, let's see, for continuous tone coded squelch systems, I think there are somewhere in the ballpark of 38 to 50 different tones, starting from 67 hertz up to, what is it, 250, 254.1 something, 254.1, no, is it 254.1, yeah. These are sub-audible tones. You cannot be heard by the ear, but the radio picks it up, acknowledges it, and allows or disallows depending on the tone. There is also something called DCS. Helps if I, yeah. Okay, digital coded squelch. And there are, what, there's, how many tones for, there's a ton of them, depending on the radio and how many they have available. There's 83 to 104 different types of digital coded squelch systems. And these are codes rather than tones. And they work in the same process. They are sub-audible. You can't hear it. You'll find that some repeater systems are set up for the DCS rather than the CTCSS. But either way, they work the same for tripping the repeater to turn it on. Some manufacturers will call these 2 things privacy codes or privacy tones, and they aren't. Some FRS radios will even have this, CTCSS or DCS. GMRS radios do, most of them have both CTCSS and DCS, but they are not privacy codes. People can still hear you when you're talking with a tone turned on. Just keep that in mind. Okay, so let's move on to the next topic. Okay, next. How you doing so far? Let's do similarities between amateur radio and GMRS. Ham. Specifically, one band in particular for amateur radio, and that would be here in the United States, the 70 centimeter band, which is 440 megahertz. Where GMRS is 462 and 467 megahertz. Okay. Yeah, let's not do it that way. Anyway, similarities. They're both high power with up to 50 watts. On certain frequencies, 5 on others, which is similar to amateur radio handhelds. They also produce 5 watts output. So we got that. We got, they're both UHF. So the radio propagation properties are very similar. The radio frequency loss in coax is the same. The radio tuning for the antenna is pretty close to the same. They both have a FCC license that is given out with a 10-year work. You can work with the license for 10 years, then you have to renew it. There is a fee for the GMRS, which is $35. There's quite a few. Of course, there's the call sign. You are issued a call sign after you've applied for your GMRS license. And you're to use that call sign just as you would a ham radio operator. However, you call out your call sign every 15 minutes while you're talking to somebody. And at the end of whatever you're going to say at the end. See, if you're just going to blurt something out real quick over the air, you would just say whatever it is and your call sign. Or if you're ending your calls, you're ending your conversation, your call sign at the end. Whereas ham radio, it's 10 minutes, but same process. You want to go with a high gain antenna. Of course, that's also due to your inherent RF loss through your coax. So you want to you don't want to use a zero gain antenna with RF loss through your coax, especially if the coax is longer than 20 feet, because you're starting to lose so much RF out of the coax, there's not much going out the antenna when you're transmitting. So yeah, you definitely want to try to get a high gain antenna. Operating lingo. If you're listening in on GMRS operations, you will find that they use a lot of the same lingo as ham radio operators do on 7 centimeter, 440 megahertz, which is fine. It's semi-professional. Self-policing. Try to keep it semi-professional on the air like ham radio operators do, so there are no idiots or garbage being transmitted over the air. That seems to be pretty good here in the northwest part of the United States. And being as popular as GMRS is right now in this section of the United States, that's great to hear. Another thing that needs to be brought up, which is in ham radio and is not being said over any GMRS forums or any booklets, is maximum permissible exposure limits. Be aware that GMRS radios putting out 50 watts on a mobile, and you have that mobile antenna with high gain, and it's mounted just feet away from your face on the lip of the hood of your car, and you can see that antenna. 50 watts plus, doubling up the amount of gain. That antenna is putting out quite a bit of RF power, and you don't want that exposure limit while you're transmitting right back at your face. Be aware that you should always have the antenna at least up on the roof or behind you and not right in front of your face. If you're running a 50 or even a 40 watt mobile, maximum permissible exposure limits. Look it up, read about it. What else we got here? I think that's good for that part of it. Let's talk about something else here. All right, here's a quick one. Purchasing. If you're purchasing a GMRS radio, whether it's an HT, handy-talkie, walkie-talkie, or a mobile, you've got to do your research, because there are many brands out there that try to get by with just certain features and functions, and some of them are not enough for certain purchasers. Do your research. Make sure it has all the options that you need. First off, is the GMRS radio repeater capable? Oops. That's funny. Anyway, some HTs, some handy-talkies are not repeater capable. If you're going to plan on using repeaters, make sure it's repeater capable. If it's a mobile, is it a full 50 watt output? Is it only 40? Is it only 20? A higher power radio is good, especially if you're getting a lot of RF loss through the coax. Say you've only got a 3 dB gain antenna and a long length of coax. Could it be better? Yes. If you're only running 20 watts to that 3 dB gain antenna with a long length of RG58U, you're going to have a lot of coax, a lot of RF loss through that coax. Would it be better if you were running a 50 watt with LMR 400 and a 6 dB gain antenna? Oh yeah, big difference. I think the word here that we need is efficiency. You really want to be efficient with the products. Make sure the products are efficient for UHF. Okay, anyway, back to what I was talking about here. Does the radio have a detachable faceplate for mounting purposes? If you've got a small interior of your vehicle, is this large mobile antenna or mobile radio going to be able to fit in there? If it has a detachable face, you can mount the radio under the seat or behind the seat, depending if it's a truck or a car. And the faceplate with a wire will run up, and you can just mount the faceplate, up where the sun visor is or somewhere on the dash, not on top of the dash. Don't put any extra heat to the radio. Sun beating down through the radio, through the windshield onto the radio, big no-no. Memory channels. You want to have memory channels. And if so, how many? How many do you need? Some radios only have 8 memory channels. Some have 99. Some have 900, whatever, you know. The more the merrier as far as memory channels. It's good to have. Does the radio have an extended, like a wideband receiver? So even though you can only talk and listen on GMRS, it's good to have a wideband receiver on the radio so that you may hear maybe ham radio operators on their repeaters, police, fire, and medical, aviation. There's a whole slew of other areas you could be listening to on a wideband receiving GMRS radio. Do you need a computer to program the radio? Or is it as easy as just programming it right at the face of the radio? Some radios are very difficult to program. That's why people run to a computer with a computer program and a wire from the computer to the radio to program all the memory channels. Keep that in mind. Some radios are hard to program. Most of those radios that are difficult to program are Chinese made, just from what I've been seeing. And it's only a temporary connect while you're programming the radio. Does the GMRS radio have digital coded squelch? Some of the older ones only have CTCSS, so keep that in mind. Weather channel. It's nice to have a weather channel with a weather alert. Does that radio have the weather alert on there? You know, there are far more other things that you can look for. These are just a few. Do your research before you buy. Maybe get on some forums. And speaking of forums, that'll be jumping into the next and the final My Thoughts area of GMRS. So let's get into that. Okay, so here are my ending thoughts on GMRS. It's another clean, quiet communications setup, very similar to the 70 centimeter band on ham radio. And it's for the whole family. And the equipment is relatively inexpensive. Easy to get a hold of. Not only can you use just GMRS radios, but you can use them with FRS radios. So anyone that has an FRS radio, you can still communicate with them with your GMRS setup, which is also good for those neighborhood setups for emergency preparedness. When the power goes out, when telephone lines go down, cell phone towers turn off, you can still use GMRS to communicate with your family. You know, during severe weather or emergencies, you can still stay connected. Very similar to ham radio. Only the costs for GMRS is much lower. And you get a lot of the same connectivity, being that you have repeaters at your fingertips just by tuning to whoever repeater is up on whatever hill near you. And You can give your young kids FRS radios and let them use those so they can get accustomed to using handheld radios. And when they get a little older and know how to use them, you can switch them up to the GMRS stuff. And everybody in the household will use the same call sign, whatever call sign was given to you when you applied for it. Other people in the family can get their own call sign if they wish, but it's not necessary. And one big thing here is that if you do plan on getting into GMRS, go online and look up mygmrs.com. Let me write that down. mygmrs.com. It's a wealth of information for anybody planning to get into GMRS, and when you're in GMRS, you can sign into that website where they have forums, they have maps showing where all the GMRS repeaters are. It shows the plot of how many miles around that repeater can reach. Tells who owns the repeater, what the tone or codes are to access the repeater. There's an abundance of information. You can actually buy GMRS radios through mygmrs.com. It's very, very popular here in the northwest part of the United States, and I was very surprised. So surprised by listening to them on a police scanner for a while, I decided myself to get a GMRS license. It's just another radio I can put in my car, have at my ready. I can use that call sign that they gave me, the FCC gave me, to use with my father, my family, in the event of an emergency or power outage. And there's a lot of power outages that go on during the winter time here in the northwestern part of the United States. But anyway, I think that's enough information for you to start on. If you are interested, like I said, mygmrs.com. Do your research before purchasing a radio, and good luck. Enjoy your radio. And this is AD7LN once again, and I'm signing off. Thanks.